Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Bennington Select Board meeting. It's Monday, January 8th. I've actually got my dates right for a change. We're at the Firehouse, and I'm Tom Jacobs, and have the benefit of chairing this wonderful group. Could you maybe introduce yourselves, starting with Nancy?
Nancy Lowry, Secretary.
Thanks, Nancy.
Good evening, Chad Gordon.
Hello, I'm Jeannie Jenkins.
Good evening, I'm Donald Campbell.
Good evening, my name is Jim Carroll.
Carson Thurber.
Thank you for coming, Jean Connor.
Whoops, thank you for coming, Jean Connor.
Is that your middle name?
And I'm Stuart Hurd, Town Manager.
Yeah, good. We're going to recite the Pledge of Allegiance if Jean Connor could lead us.
Tom, that wasn't funny.
Hang on.
Yeah, I think. Missing our panels too.
It might have been a part-time person who set it up tonight. The other guys might have been all fun. I mean, I walked in here and I said, "This is garbage."
I want my pay doubled.
Yeah.
Further over? Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, gentlemen.
I pledge allegiance
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thank you for the flag movers and for leading us, Jean. We have the consent agenda, which has been circulated, including the minutes of December 19th of last year, 2017, and December 27th of 2017. We have the warrants that were circulated as well. I'd entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda as circulated.
So moved.
Second?
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion on the minutes or the warrants? Hearing none, all in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
That's 7 in favor and no opposition. The next item on the agenda is a public hearing that's been noticed, and this is the first hearing on this matter. It's the Bennington Town Plan Amendment relative to the energy element. We are going to be led in the discussion by Dan Monks, our Assistant Town Manager. You've all been in receipt of that. We got it at the last meeting, I believe. And Jim Sullivan is also going to be here with Bennington Regional Planning Corporation, BCRC. Okay.
Thank you. Hello, everyone.
There's a lot of static in
There
the
is a
air.
lot of static. We are here this evening for the first of two required public hearings regarding the...
I don't think your mic is not on.
Sorry. Okay.
Thanks.
We are here this evening for the first of two required public hearings regarding the proposed town plan energy element. This was presented to the Select Board a few weeks ago, so you've had a few weeks to see it. But just a little quick history on this proposed town plan energy element. In addition to the fact that having a good, solid, thoughtful plan for the use of and conservation and production of energy, this plan was developed in response to Act 174, which is a state law that allows for towns to develop energy plans pursuant to certain requirements that will give them greater power and authority at the Public Utility Commission hearings. You will recall that the PUC has exclusive authority over electric generation facilities, and they do have to varying degrees, look at and review and defer to town plans. Act 174 allows us to elevate our town plan to the highest level of deference. It's known as substantial deference versus due consideration. let's just say that by complying with Act 174, the Public Utilities Commission will take our town plan into account and give it much more authority than they will under the current situation. The energy plan, just a quick summary of what is in the energy plan. The first part is really a collection of data and analysis of data regarding energy usage and production. It looks at several different sectors of energy usage in the town, including the residential sector, commercial and industrial, municipal and institutional, including the town, hospital, schools and colleges, and the all-important transportation sector. It also takes a quick look at and talks about existing local energy production. The second section is really the meat of the plan, and it develops or proposes several strategies for conservation, energy efficiency, and renewable energy production. It discusses strategies regarding all of the sectors discussed above, and it looks at specifically renewable energy development strategies, including biomass, hydro, wind resources, and solar. It's a comprehensive plan. I know a lot of energy, no pun intended, has been focused on the solar aspect of the plan, but this plan is comprehensive in nature and attempts to look at strategies for energy across the spectrum, not just the generation of solar energy. It does include a section on solar siting policy, and it does have a map of preferred sites. I know this has garnered most of the attention, but it is just one part of a much more comprehensive plan. Again, this evening, really we're here to answer questions from the Select Board. You're here to solicit input from the public.
Right.
No, we would not expect any decisions this evening, only after the second hearing, unless, of course, you decide that there are significant issues that you'd like to send back to the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission could then do their work to try to address those concerns and bring it back to you. But no decision is necessary this evening, nor is it one expected.
Great. I appreciate that last comment. Jim, could you just share some thoughts on your involvement in the process and that arrived at the amendment before the Planning Commission?
Sure. Yeah, and Dan covered most of my usual high points, especially the bit about it being a comprehensive energy plan. I'd also just like to reiterate that it's an amendment to the town plan. A lot of times it's perceived as being a standalone document, but it really is part of the town plan, and it's integrated with the rest of the town plan, because several of the other sections of the town plan have important considerations related to energy conservation and efficiency. So it really needs to all be considered together. That's true as far as town planning is concerned, as well as the Act 174 standards that have to be met. And so our involvement with the Regional Planning Commission basically came about subsequent to adoption or enactment of Act 174 at the state level. The Regional Planning Commission completed and adopted a regional energy plan that provided some context and background for town energy planning. So immediately upon completion of that, we started working with municipalities, Bennington really being the first of those, to develop town energy plans that would be consistent with the Act 174 standards. During that time that we were working with Bennington, the regional energy plan was submitted to the Department of Public Service for a determination of it as to whether or not it was compliant with the Act 174 planning standards, and we received a positive determination. So now that action has taken place, the Bennington County Regional Commission is in the position of reviewing and approving municipal plans under Act 174. So if the town chooses, you don't have to, subsequent to adopting this plan amendment or one like it, the town can submit that to the Regional Planning Commission for a determination that would then provide that status before the Public Utility Commission that Dan was referring to.
So it's possible that what we decide, we could then make a recommendation, depending upon the adoption of this in whole or in part, to the commission for its basically exprimatur,
Yeah, then we get to have a public hearing too.
Okay, okay, good.
So,
Yeah, it's only
Yeah.
fair. Based upon, I know we love to think of ourselves as unique, but there are other towns that are considering plans along these lines.
Yeah, around the state and in our region, locally, we've got plans pretty close, not as far along as Bennington's, but in Manchester, Dorset, and Sunderland, and we'll be starting to work on some more. Not all towns are going to want to get involved in this. It's it provides us certain benefits, and I think it helps improve the overall plan for a municipality, but it's also a fair bit of extra work and thought. So towns that want to go through the process, we're available to work with them. I don't believe that there has been one of these Act 174 plans. Maybe one has been adopted somewhere in the state of Vermont, but I don't believe any of them have yet gotten the Act 174 determination.
Okay. What I'd like to do is just open questions to my colleagues, and then we'll ask the public to step up and speak for or against the matter, and we'll take it under consideration and reconvene on the matter 2 weeks hence. Okay? So.
Do you want to leave them there?
Yeah, I just assume, why don't you
Don't
stay
you
there
go
for a
away,
minute?
Dan.
Yeah, we have some, maybe the board has a question or two. Would you like to start, Jean, if you have any?
Sure.
Or
I have one. It's on page 10, having to do with the public schools. I was just curious, this data probably doesn't take into consideration the work that was done. Sorry. I turned it off so the static may settle down. So I want to start over?
Page 10.
Okay, page 10, the part that has to do with the public schools, I'm assuming this data doesn't take into consideration the work that was done at the 2 elementary schools on their windows and new heating systems?
That's so you don't have to say anymore. That's true as far as the data in the table goes. In the text, and it notes that because there wasn't complete information yet on energy usage subsequent to the improvements. But in the text, it's noted what the estimated savings were going to be for the various improvements.
No questions.
Just one note here, and this I think goes more to you, Stu, if you can give an answer for it. I noted in here that we switched at the rec center to a high-efficiency boiler, and previously we were burning 54,000 gallons of propane in 2012, and it was reduced to nearly half at 29,000. And I wonder if there are similar savings that could be made with respect to other properties that the town owns, if you've explored that.
We focus on the rec center because it is one of our highest users. We're also focusing on the wastewater treatment facility because that too is a very high user, one of our highest users of electricity. And we've done some energy efficiency work in the senior center. And obviously the new public works facility will be more energy efficient perhaps than a facility of that size would be 5 years ago, but that's due to some of the upgrades that were made by the previous owner. But as far as things like the town offices and some of our other smaller facilities, they are oil generation, standard boilers. They haven't been upgraded in a number of years. All of the buildings have been insulated. All of the windows, to the extent that we can from a historic perspective, have been upgraded. But with some of our historic buildings, we're not allowed to change the exterior windows under the guidelines. In some cases, we have actually installed interior windows in the wintertime to cut down on some of the drafts. So we've done some work, but not all of our buildings are propane heated, and that limits us.
One more thing, and I brought this up in our budget meeting this past Saturday and made reference to the CCV who installed geothermal energy, which results in effect for just an electric bill, because they're pushing air that both cools and heats the buildings. And I asked you to explore that, and I just want to reemphasize that it could be really dramatic savings if we were to, I know that it couldn't be done overnight for each and every one of our properties, but it could really be quite a dramatic savings for the people of Bennington.
It has that potential.
That's it.
And Jim, if I could, I mean, geothermal is a great idea. The upfront capital cost on geothermal is extremely high.
It is.
It tends to be, most cost competitive for new construction. But especially for smaller buildings or buildings that are well insulated, weatherized, you can look at air source heat pumps, which are essentially the same technology, but they take the heat from the air as opposed to the ground. So that's definitely something to keep in mind going forward.
Any idea of the cost differential, Jim?
Not off the top of my head, and I'm sure it's a kind of a pretty unique case-by-case situation.
I think it's worth looking into.
Thanks, Jim. Go ahead, Noel.
Well, so not surprisingly, we did receive a 6-page letter from ALCO Renewable Energy, and it makes an awful lot of big claims about things that are wrong with our process here. But the one that really rankled me was the one that talked about it as being a discriminatory process, the selecting of preferred sites. And we worked so hard on that and for so long. Dan, I wonder if you'd be willing to just go through some of the data that we used. It's true that we can't get down to the parcel by parcel site specific stuff that they may have mentioned here, but it might be worth just talking about how we got to that preferred sites map.
Jim, and you can step in.
And the BCRC was a big part of
Jim's,
helping us, yeah.
Colleague, Catherine Breyer, actually did most of the, there she is, okay. She did most of the hard work, heavy lifting on the analysis. I'm sorry. So Jim mentioned the regional energy plan that was adopted recently. That's where we started. They did a lot of analysis, baseline analysis for us. So things like, remind me of the wetlands, floodplains, rare and endangered species. What other constraints did you guys identify?
Oh, there's a whole list that are on start at page 23 of the plan, I think. So in addition to the things you mentioned, there's river corridors, rare, threatened, endangered species, federal wilderness areas, primary and secondary, significant agricultural soils, conserved lands, deer wintering areas, and forest conservation design blocks. Those are all state mandated environmental constraints to be considered in the mapping process.
So Jim's group took care of it, looking at those and giving us maps that clearly identified those areas as being off limits. So we didn't even have to look at those because those were already declared by the state as off limits. So that was our baseline map. In addition to that, his group identified where the solar resource exists. You know, if it's in the shadow of a mountain, no matter if there's no constraints or not, nobody's going to put a solar facility in the shadow. So in addition to this, so we had the constraints list, constraints map, and we also had the map that identified where the solar resource existed. So that was a great place to start. We didn't have to look at the whole town at every single parcel. We were able to narrow it down pretty quickly. Did it have state constraints? And yes, no. Did it have access to the solar resource? Yes, no. So no constraints and solar resource, okay, we're going to start looking at those. Then we started adding in the layers of the local constraints. Zoning issues like the fact that for the most part we want rural conservation areas to be protected. We wanted to protect forest areas. We wanted to protect prime ag land. All those sorts of things. We wanted to protect visually sensitive areas. We wanted to protect areas that were historically sensitive or important. So all those things were layered in. Catherine made maps for us. We had all kinds of unique requests, but she did a great job for us. And so we got that down to a very manageable amount of property to look at. And then we went through that, we went through those parcels pretty meticulously and made a determination. We made phone calls to determine whether or not the property owner was even interested in solar, as we identified those preferred sites, because we didn't want to be disingenuous. We didn't want to say, hey, this is a great site for solar, even though we know the property owner would never put it there. So we tried to do everything we could to identify sites that were would realistically be available for solar development. We narrowed that down to about a total of 600 acres. Is that right, Jim?
I think about 540.
540, and then we did a further analysis after that there are some constraints on those 540 acres that might not allow for unlimited solar on those sites, and we got down to about 348, even if you take into account some additional possible constraints that would come up. So that's how we narrowed it down, and it took a lot of time and a lot of effort from a lot of folks, and a lot of faces out here helped us with that process. I know Donald was on that, helped with that process, and so did Jim, and Mr. Keene was involved. So it was not done lightly, quickly, or thoughtlessly. We put a lot of effort into it and a lot of thought.
Mary Morrissey and Rick Carroll, too. Don't forget
Yes.
that.
Yeah, thanks for that description. I do think it was important, and it's probably worth saying that some of their points are true, that when we get down to looking at those parcels, they may be preferred parcels, and yet there may be further constraints as you start doing field work on the parcels. So we don't know that, and I think our group was not tasked with going to that level of going out and doing field work on the individual parcels.
And frankly, we wouldn't have the resources.
We wouldn't have the resources,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
And I could just add that I mean, that's a good point, Donald. The computerized mapping is only as good as the data. We all know that, but it's certainly a place to start and to get people looking in the right direction. There's one other point I wanted to make was, Act 174, when it comes to doing the mapping work, has some pretty specific requirements. First, the base mapping stuff, which is, as Dan indicated, the resource areas, and then the so-called known and possible constraints, which were mentioned. But then any additional constraints that are layered on by the municipality that are added to those state-identified constraints, they have to be backed up by some type of analysis and rationale. And so any of those that were proposed, Catherine worked with the town to put together an analysis that shows the studies or plans that those constraints were based on, and a reasonable rationale for their inclusion in the plan.
Yeah, and I think this is largely saber rattling, but
Well, the thing is, tonight, because it was submitted, we will have it as part of the presentation by Alco, although they're apparently not here, I'm not sure. We'll make it part of the record for the value that is or isn't.
okay.
But I don't want to discount that.
Okay, thanks. All set for me.
Okay.
Point of order, that wasn't provided to anyone else other than you.
It'll be part of the minutes, and it'll be available to you'll be available to the general public during the next 2 weeks, and if you'd like to comment on it, we'll allow that.
Well, I want to point out that none of the public who's here can comment on that tonight, not having seen it.
We expect you would not be able to. We just got this today.
Yeah, it came in this morning.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I would.
So point of order is out of order, and we'll take it under consideration. We'll accept this for the purposes it was
It
submitted.
not be included in the record until the public has had a chance to see it.
No.
I shouldn't have brought it up maybe, but anyway.
Oh, it's part, it's their submittal for whatever it is, and we'll talk about it in a little detail, maybe, if not tonight, also later on.
All right.
Yep, go ahead.
Okay. So it's really excellent work.
Thank you. I'm happy to see it. I had a moment, as I'm sure others did when they read our oil bill for the month of December. So I'm happy to, I'll look forward to seeing what we do with it. And I'm also happy to hear that we're on the front end of, our town is on the front end of adopting this energy plan. It's really excellent. So thank you very much.
No questions, just thank you for an excellent report.
One of the questions on the mapping, it appeared that a good part of the preferred sites or available sites are in industrial zones.
Yes, a significant amount of them, yes.
Would you say what percentage in the town would be? I didn't bring that part.
I can certainly look that up, but it's a substantial percentage, but I don't think I can answer that
And we exceeded what's the number of acres that we exceeded the state of Vermont's request for per town? Do you recall?
Well, there's a fairly complex formula that is used to determine the amount of solar generating capacity by region and then broken down to the town level. So, roughly 25 megawatts of generating capacity would be what Bennington would have to contribute to the regional mix to move us toward the state goals, and that's 25 megawatts over the next 30 plus years by 2050. The amount that's available on preferred sites is really exceeds that in and of itself, but then there's additional capacity that's available from rooftops and from the smaller scale sites that are available around the town that, that aren't so-called preferred sites but can still be developed with smaller projects. So the total capacity that's identified in the plan is actually exceeds 100 megawatts. So well beyond the so-called municipal target.
A question that's probably a yes or no. Would you say that roughly 40% of the acreage of the preferred locations is controlled by the town of Bennington?
A good portion of it is controlled by the town of Bennington because one of the largest areas is the landfill, which makes we think there was no discord about whether or not that was an appropriate site. So that is a large amount of acreage. I don't know if it's 40%, but it's a significant portion. Yeah.
But
it's probably not 40%, but okay. I think the Malones, they were confusing publicly owned land as opposed for town-owned land.
That was my next question. Public versus controlled.
Because the state is a public property. The schools, those sorts of things. There are school sites. There's the state of Vermont sites. Those sorts of things. In addition to private sites. In fact, one of the Malone's properties is even listed as a preferred site.
Right. We're going to put this in the minutes for the public hearing today. It's going to be available to the general public, which will give the opportunity to dialogue further. But frankly, on its own, it really doesn't add much to the mix. At least I see that tonight. Is that what you were?
Except to irritate a little bit.
Well, good. Any other questions from the board? If not, I think I would like to have the folks that are in favor of the energy amendment come and speak to it if they would like. It's certainly your prerogative. If you could just sign in, or just not sign in, but just speak your name and your address, and we'll hear from you. Go ahead. Are you proponents or of the amendment?
I did have a comment time, and I feel to give a couple minutes.
Sure. No, I was going to.
Property owner.
Sure. Property owners are certainly welcome. I just would like to hear from the proponents of the amendment as being dealt with tonight. And if there's opposition, I'd like to hear from those folks too. Laura, please. Yeah, I guess we haven't circulated the mic yet.
Laura Block in Apple Hill Development. I've sat through many of the hearings, the Planning Commission hearings for the energy siting plan, and the discussions at the solar siting project, and I know the huge amount of effort that went into this plan, and I just have one word to say, which is I hope that you adopt this, because it's something that we really, really need for the town. It's not just related to solar siting, as you said, Jeannie, and it would be something that we really need here, and it would be very nice for Bennington to be one of the first towns to get our plan certified by the BCRC. We should be very proud of that. So that's all I have to say, and I hope you will vote on it at the next hearing and vote in favor.
Thank you. Other folks, please.
Hi, I'm Diana Leeser. I just have a simple thank you to everybody that worked on the solar siting project and the energy siting language and all the hours and time and months and time away from work. And, you know, it was an outstanding project that if we're out front, then that's just awesome. And I just think it's terrific what everybody did. So
There's been a lot of energy expended
yeah.
to save energy in the future.
Yeah, exactly.
That's for sure.
I mean, Jim and Don and Rick and Mary and just so many people have worked on it that it's been a real team effort, which is nice.
You were there too.
Okay.
So credit where credit is due.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other proponents of
Same to
the
you, Laura.
amendment?
I guess you'd have to call me.
Yeah, okay. Bob, would you like to come up?
Yeah, I'm really not opposed.
I know, I expect it, but
Have some negative comments.
sure, nope, that's why we're having the public hearing.
Thank you, Board, for having the opportunity for me to be here. I'm a property owner.
Bob Kubilia, for those that...
Yeah, name's Bob Kubilia.
Yeah.
I live on the west side.
Yeah.
Bought our land in 1986. Been a good steward, I think, of our property. It's been in use value for many years. And I've gone through multiple zoning changes since 1986. You folks may not know that there's a solar farm on my land. There's a 500 kW site that is on some very steep section of our property, right adjacent to the Tanziter EPA toxic waste cleanup site. Has no impact on my land, and I'm glad they cleaned theirs up, hopefully, but it's there. And that steep land made an excellent site because on 4 acres of land, I was able to get what would normally cover a footprint of 5 acres. And I have a lot of property like this. It's all steep, beautiful southern exposure. 3 years ago, when the Bennington Regional Commission cited properly southern exposure areas, mine was like a poster child. And at that time, we talked about 3 opportunities to make a good solar site. The question today in the paper last week was what makes a preferred site? So my reason is not to find fault with what this board is doing. It's to try to get a perfect plan. I think that the rural areas may not have had the proper input that they should have. I was never contacted by the town about my input, and I would like to see my site as a preferred site. There's already the 500, and I don't see why, if I had to do it today, that site wouldn't be allowed. Nobody even knows it's there. It's screened, and it's on the uphill side of the road. I have other lands in the back. Nobody can see you from there. So when you start getting back, we used to have a thing called a scenic byway or scenic corridor in one of the zonings. That's gone now. But there was a setback to keep the viewscape looking nice. And I'm not sure in this current layout of this proposal that if my site was to be proposed today, it would be allowed. And to me, I think that's wrong and wasteful of good rural land. That same steep slope makes it so it's not prime ag land. So if somebody said, gee, there's grow corn up there, well, you can grow corn on shale bed, but it's not a great site, it's just steeper than heck. So has a great aspect. If I wanted to expand, I know there's protocol to do it, but I wouldn't want to rule that against me. So my purpose today is to see this board and ask them to not throw away rural conservation zones. Not just for me, I'm speaking for all the landowners in town who may not have had any public input or been contacted. I don't think we want to get into taking property rights without compensation. And this board's worked hard to try to avoid those sort of issues. And I appreciate and condemn them, or not condemn, but commend them for doing that. But one of the things that you've seen with solar is the aesthetics have been lacking. Mine, you can't tell it's there, but boy, you can see an awful lot of them that look ugly, whether they're by the Rutland Airport or if they're on the road to Troy, New York, they're building them right on top of the highway. I understand why they do it, but to me, that's aesthetics. It's how it looks. You can put them on top of a building, sure, but that's still not doing what you need to me, siting. It means get it out of the public eye and making it so it blends in nicely. So my site does that, meets all, you also need three-phase power close by. So I had the enchilada. I got the site, solar site, close to three-phase, and it's already there, and they, so that's my 2 bits.
Okay, no, that's helpful, Bob.
So unless you had some questions for me.
Yep, so don't go anywhere. But Dan, can you
Comment on that.
comment on the property that he's talking about and whether or not that fits within the parameters of what we all worked so hard on?
Bob is correct, it's not identified as a preferred site. That was to eliminate most rural conservation areas from consideration was a policy decision that was made and supported by the Planning Commission. Certainly, if this board doesn't feel that's the right policy decision, we could go back to the drawing board on that issue. But it is in the rural conservation zone. It's solar is not preferred in that area, only if there are unique characteristics, such as landfill, that were they considered. So it's really, you have to make some hard choices. I'm not one of those people who finds solar facilities offensive, but there are lots of folks that unfortunately don't like Mr. Kabilia's solar facility because they can see it from Pleasant Valley. So it really is a policy decision that the Planning Commission has recommended, and it's up to the Select Board whether they want to accept that policy decision or ask the Planning Commission to reconsider that. So that's the bottom line.
It's probably worth just remembering that we're really talking about 150K and up.
Right, so that's a very good point, Donald, and thank you for pointing that out. So they could, anyone in almost anywhere, as long as they meet the other criteria, could put a 150 kilowatt site in, which is a much smaller site, but it isn't saying no solar, it just says no large scale solar.
Right.
So.
Call me stupid, but I think you ought to concentrate sites. If I have one, you ought to have another one right adjacent to it, and that same area's got all the same good criteria, and to take bulk acreage and knock it out because there's already one there, doesn't cut it. There's some value in concentrating assets, including the power line that's already there. It's certainly enough capacity to take an additional system.
But there's some limitations in that line as well. More concentrated makes, you can have 4 projects of 150 getting together and you're over the limit. So I think that's been looked at by the Planning Commission because of that issue. But I understand where you're coming from.
I'd be happy to show anyone that wanted to see the site if they want to do an on-site visitation by appointment.
Thanks, Bob.
Okay. Any other questions?
Oh, good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions, comments relative? Sure. Good evening.
My name is Joe Schoenig. I'm from Apple Hill. I certainly am for the siting that has been done, but I think Another thing that maybe should be considered in the future to add is the efficiency. We're giving up land, and we may not be getting the most out of it. As an example, if you were to put panels up at a 15-degree angle, that basically we're getting most of the power in the summertime. Okay. But our needs are essentially greatest in the winter, a little bit less in the fall and spring, and it's just such a shame to put these panels up at a low angle that is going to be covered with snow and decrease what we're getting out of it in the first place, and then further deny, you know, we have shorter daylight hours. We're inside trying to heat our houses or our offices or whatever. The wintertime is when we need it, and really it should be set at a higher angle, steeper angle, possibly including tracking systems. Solar is basically 12% efficient at best, unless you put on something like a Fresnel lens over top of it, which would double that. But we're taking this valuable land that we so love, and we're minimizing what we're getting out of it. So it seems to me that consideration should be given to
design control and
how we can get the most out of it.
Could you speak to, go ahead. Dan, Jim, could you speak to this question, whether or not under the amendment there's any attributions, benefit, or detraction from that comment?
Something is more than nothing, but why sell ourselves short?
Jim?
It's hard to speak to that one briefly, but I'll try, especially. It's a good point that's made, that when you lower the angle, you reduce the actual kilowatt-hour production of the panels in the times of the year when the sun's lower to the horizon, like the winter. You do much better if it's tipped higher. That said, you know, solar photovoltaic, regardless of the tilt angle, is much more productive in the summertime because of the length of the daylight and the amount of sunlight. You know, the ideal solution is to have them all solar trackers, I suppose, that, you know, they track the sunlight, but the upfront cost on those tend to make them prohibitive. I think that the thing that the point argues for is a mix of renewable energy generation, solar, hydro, wind, locally and imported. It's not an easy answer, and there are problems with all of them. And the orientation of solar panels seasonally is certainly one of them. It's not something that's specifically addressed in this plan amendment. Beyond talking in general about the seasonality of different types of renewable generation.
You stole my thunder, Jim.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Joe.
My question was about the, I don't think we ever contemplated in our deliberations the angle of solar panels. So more to your question, there is currently no prohibition within our solar siting guidelines.
Well, I think we were going at it more as from a regulatory point of view, thinking what is it you're prohibiting and what is it we're trying to protect as a community, not telling each individual landowner what to do and which company and what angle and whatnot. Mm-hmm. It's an interesting idea that maybe we insist on some sort of level of efficiency if we offer approval, but we certainly didn't go anywhere near that. Mm-hmm. We were more looking at what does the community need us to do.
Yeah, I mean,
the one thing that we emphasized in all of our deliberations, and I'm not speaking for the people that I worked with, was it came down, in my opinion, to aesthetics. And the most valuable resource that we as Vermonters have always believed in, and that is our scenic beauty and the impact that solar panels and other solar siding and energy components would have on the scenic beauty of the state. Is that a fair assessment, Jim?
Well, I think you correctly identified the fact that there's trade-offs and compromises with any of these orientations and arrangements. And certainly when you have a lower tilt angle, you can put the panels closer together because they don't shade each other as much. So you can get the same capacity in a smaller area and have, more screening on that parcel as a result. At the same time, you're giving up some generation.
But Jim, I would disagree with you, although we had spent a lot of time in that committee together. I saw this process as being very data-driven and being very much driven by specifics, so that contrary to this letter of complaint that we've received, it was not a capricious process. It was not a process that involved favoritism or kind of picking our favorite places, but was one that where the preferred sites revealed themselves as a result of the data layers that we were using.
Thank you. Any other comments during this public hearing? Hearing none, we'll close it for today and reopen for the second hearing 2 weeks hence. Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to, we would normally go into citizens' comment, but I think using the chair's prerogative, I'm going to ask that the manager's report come to the front of this, the rest of the agenda. Stuart, could you start with the report that you're sharing with the board and the community?
Yes, this is actually not part of my manager's report, but the board asked me to prepare a statement regarding salt and sand shed construction that the town undertook this past fall, and I will read that statement. The town began construction of the new salt sand shed prior to receiving the wetlands permit. The project is located entirely within what was previously a paved parking lot. No wetlands were proposed to be disturbed, only existing pavement within a wetlands buffer area.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't have that on. Shall I start again?
Yep, please.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you, Gene. The town began construction on the new salt sand shed prior to receiving the wetlands permit. The project is located entirely within what was previously a paved parking lot. No wetlands were proposed to be disturbed, only existing pavement within a wetlands buffer area. Approximately 40% of the proposed structure is outside of this buffer. Our wetlands specialist, a former employee of the Wetlands Division, believed that a permit would be fairly straightforward and prepared an application in strict conformance with the wetland rules. We began conversations with the division in May of 2017, actually before we owned the property. The process moved very slowly through August into September. Anticipating construction to begin in late September, we had several discussions with state officials and employees regarding our concern for the lengthy wetlands permit process. We had hoped to have access to the salt sand shed prior to winter weather to mitigate long-standing issues at our current facility on Orchard Road. And in September, we were told that technical review would begin soon. We thought a draft permit was imminent. Unfortunately, it was not. We had very competitive bids for the work. The contractors were making expenditures in preparation for the work. We had a very tight timeline in which to complete the job. Had we not moved forward, we would have lost the contractors, the competitive pricing, and set the entire project back several months, most likely resulting in higher costs. As it was, we were projecting a $60,000 to $75,000 savings based on the bids we had. I didn't take the decision lightly, but I concluded that we must begin construction, anticipating that a permit would be issued soon. Unfortunately, it was not. I accept full responsibility for my decision. I made it on my own volition without board knowledge or consent,
and I apologize to the board and to the community. In conclusion, we constructed the shed in conformance with the proposed permit conditions, mitigating any impacts on the wetlands. We have not stored any salt or sand on site and will not do so until we are certain of compliance with all of the conditions in the recently issued permit. It is important to note that the project actually reduces paved surface and creates an additional buffer that should prevent any damage to the wetlands. The wetlands permit was actually issued on January 3rd, 2018. It institutes performance standards and a monitoring program to ensure water quality standards are met. We have implemented the required monitoring plan and will comply with all of the permit conditions.
That's your statement?
That is my statement.
For the general public, it's important that you understand that this was not the direction of the Bennington Select Board. We were quite disappointed to understand that this activity was undertaken without our participating in that process. This is the type of management that is foreign to us. We recognize pretty high standards, and we expect the management to meet and exceed those standards. In this particular case, it failed to happen. The dice was rolled. The dice shouldn't even have been rolled. Fact of the matter is, we should have waited until we had permits in hand. The Select Board does have a relationship with our town manager, and we will be addressing that issue in private executive session, because he has a right to the personnel, we have the right to recognize the obligations that we have to him as a member of our team. But having said that, we are disappointed. We've got a very good project completed, but unfortunately it was not done consistent with what the requirements of the law at that point in time were. I would like, if other members of the board like to comment, but I think that really speaks for how we feel about this situation tonight. Other members, if you feel so inclined.
The only question that I have, Stu, and I've talked with you about it, and I respect the fact that you said that you didn't want to throw anybody under the bus with respect to how slow the process was. And I asked you why you didn't just go to the governor. And I think the general public would like to hear your answer on that.
Chairman, I'm going to stand by my statement.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That's all I had to say.
I'm going to go now to citizens' comment, and if you would speak to the subject at hand, and I see Joey Culkin is on the list. Joey, would you like to make a comment?
Hello, Happy New Year. Thanks for permitting me to speak. Thanks, Stu, for that statement. So I just wanted to congratulate Don on filing his petition for re-election. I understand you're making another run. Word on the street is you could be the chair, and they say you'd be a great chair, and I'd like to congratulate Jimmy Joe on taking out a petition. You're probably running again, and good luck for a third term, I believe.
Thank you.
I was wondering if either of you could update folks at home about March vote, with budgets. I think the agencies are asking for $800,000, and, budgets are just always bloated a little bit. And with other things coming up, like a TIF vote, could you educate us about any TIF bond votes that might be happening in March, and for what projects they would be attached to?
You're probably going to have to await a response until our budget sessions are completed, because we do speak in some uniformity. I don't think to try to figure out what we're going to do relative to TIF votes in March or any other vote. I think it's pretty premature.
Do you think there will be one? Because the town worked for a year so hard to get it, and it seemed like the plan was to have a bond vote in March. And
the town worked real hard. Management worked even harder. But the essence of it is, I think the town, we're getting a little bond weary right now, and not to have it in March is not going to make the projects go away. I think they're going to be moving forward without the TIF vote, especially Phase 1, but that's really up to the developers. We're going to have a vote on the TIF support in the district, but that's going to take time and education so that the public buys into it. We just can't, again, I think that we got the TIF district. We won't go anywhere without that. We now have it, and I think the step-off point is to see where the projects lead us. But I'd rather speak for these gentlemen tonight. You can speak when you're going on your campaign trail. I'm sure you'll have an opportunity to address those.
They're good questions, though, Joe, and thank you for asking, but I think we're really making an effort to keep citizens' comment as a period of time for citizens to comment. So, but we'll have plenty of time to go at it over the next couple months. So,
I just want to make one remark. And Joe, you did bring up an important point, and I've spoken with several of the other board members. Now that we have the TIF, really, we need to start thinking about how we're going to implement that and where. We've got plenty of lead time, so it's something that I think that we need to discuss and talk about. That's it.
Okay, thanks.
You're right that there's a lot coming up for the March vote, a lot of big issues. Yeah.
Come to the next budget meeting, you'll hear some more. Okay, thanks, Joe. Sam Racino? Good evening, Sam.
How's everybody doing tonight? I guess we're hopping around the agenda today. I don't know if we're going to get feedback or not. I got two items. I'll be brief on it. Back about a month ago, I'm quite sure you've all heard up by where Applegate is, you get a lot of pedestrian traffic near Harwood Hill. A lot of people tend to walk in that area. There was a serious accident, some pedestrians getting hit. That brought up to my concern that a while back there was the discussion to connect Applegate with Willowbrook, and that seemed to be, well, not seemed to be, it was a costly project to do that. I looked in that area, and all I'm asking, there again, we are always extending our sidewalks on the north side of Orchard Road, which used to be Willow Road. Could we possibly look at installing a sidewalk from Molly Stark to Applegate to give them at least a place to walk?
I think Stu can speak to that, right? It's ongoing.
I'd actually rather have Dan, since he's kind of the principal
architect of this.
creating this wonderful opportunity.
So, I mean, back in the day when I grew up, we used the railroad track. That's overgrown now, so.
So Sam is correct, it's an important pedestrian connection, Applegate to Molly Stark. And we have, hopefully, and we're keeping our fingers crossed, we hope to have approval from the Vermont Agency of Transportation to go out to bid on that project that you all know about, which is a connection, pedestrian connection between Applegate, Willowbrook, and continuing on to Molly Stark. It was a great collaboration between the select board and the school board to come up with a match, and I know that BCRC has been working really hard to, with our engineering team to get that project ready. The state has all the final bid documents, and all we're waiting for is for the go-ahead from them to put the project out to bid, and we hope to build it winter, spring, so it'll be ready for the next school year. So we're very excited about that project. Unfortunately, these projects take about 5 years, and I think we're going to get this one done in about 4 years, so we hope to have that done this summer. Sam, you might have forgotten about that because it takes so long to get these projects through the V-Trans process. But we're this close, so we're very excited about that, and we were actually going to talk about that at the next meeting, but Sam got me to talk about it tonight, so we're hopeful that we can announce that that's going out to bid as early as late January. But again, we're waiting on the Agency of Transportation for the final go-ahead.
So I pushed the cat out of the bag. Okay. Second thing, changing hats for, as you know, I'm part of Southern Vermont Today along with Jeff Grimshaw, and we have taken an initiative of adopting a fire hydrant through the winter months. As you know, in the winter months, they get buried, they get abused, people don't shovel them out, so ourselves, we've taken in hand out to the general public around Bennington and North Bennington and beyond, if they want to adopt a fire hydrant, do so. We've got on our web page, or actually on our Facebook page, You can sign up and you can tell us what one you want to adopt, or if you can't adopt it, we'll find somebody to dig it out, or I might even dig it out.
I think
Now-
a dog could help you.
Huh?
I think a dog could help you find any buried.
Well, I'm getting there. I'm asking the select board member, I'm wondering if you're going to lead by example. Where your home is, would you adopt a fire hydrant and lead by example and show the community that you will lead by example? You probably got to look for where your nearest fire hydrant is.
Exactly.
I probably never knew that there was one. And of course, what comes to mind is because of the cold weather, I'm not a fireman, but when they go fight a fire and they find out that it's frozen, they got to go to the next available fire hydrant. And that could be a block away.
We've often heard, and Stu's reminded us of that, he takes care of his hydrants and we should take care of ours. And the fire department's also been very good. I think I'll follow your advice if I can find my hydrant. Because it's probably,
I'll help you look.
Thanks.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sam.
Mike, if we turn off one of those microphones, will we get less feedback?
I can turn them on and off.
Okay.
It's not
It's
static.
yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Bring a humidifier next week. The next item is the Grow Bennington initiative. This is very exciting and interesting discussion. Lynn and Dan.
Poor Jeannie Jenkins has seen this about 16 times.
And I enjoy it every single time.
Good.
Doesn't change at all.
Do you need the lights down a little bit?
Who is up there? I've never done this sitting down, so we'll see how this goes.
Well, I have the distinct pleasure tonight of talking about...
It seems like the light's right over. Yeah.
Okay. I have the pleasure this evening of introducing Lynn Green. She gets to talk about Grow Bennington, but I get to talk about Lynn. And Lynn has been a force of nature with regard to this project. It's her brainchild. She has been tireless. Just an amazing booster for this project. She's a tireless fundraiser, just a person that's so exciting to work with. And, a lot of folks like to say things like, well, you should do this, and it would really be great if you did this. But the thing about Lynn is she says we should do this, and then she does most of the work. So that's the great thing about Lynn, and this has been a really exciting project, grassroots project. And Lynn has been just instrumental in pushing this forward, and we've had great success. I say we, it's mostly Lynn's work, but there are a few of us that have been working in Lynn's shadow. So Lynn is going to talk about the initiative, and I hope that you'll be as excited as I am by what she's accomplished. So thank you.
Thank you. I had no idea you were going to say all of that. I'll make one correction. It is not my brainchild. This is definitely a group effort and an ongoing work in progress. But all right, so the Grow Bennington Initiative. I think I'll just start with the guiding principle of the Grow Bennington Initiative, and that is that we all benefit from a thriving downtown, and we think we can all contribute to a thriving downtown. So if you look at me, I own a business outside of the downtown. You'll see many of these early supporters are all from outside of the downtown. But the idea is, in today's environment of Amazon Prime and overnight deliveries, that it really fundamentally requires changing the way that communities view their downtowns. And it really isn't just a battle for Knapp's or for the bookshop or for Gamers Grotto or South Street Cafe. We're all in this together. And we all need a vibrant downtown, whether that's for making a better place for all of us to go with our family and walk downtown and be downtown, to draw visitors. Obviously, visitors are a very crucial part of our economy, recruiting and retaining employees, and then to retain and attract millennials. Can everyone see that okay?
Yes.
Okay. And then I think that's really key too, because of, as many of you know, we are fighting a declining and aging population in Vermont. So just a really quick history. The Grow Bennington initiative really started about this time last year with a group of businesses who were meeting on a different topic, but all of these great ideas were flying around about why people really come to Bennington and what are some of the things that are attractive about Bennington, what are some of the things we're missing. And I kind of thought, what if we actually collected those? What if we tried to make something tangible and do something with that? And a lot of these ideas were just creative thoughts on the part of citizens, conversations with visitors, telling us why they come here, and research. We did a lot of research, whether it was Betsy Woods at the Knotty Pine, Teresa at the Hampton Inn. Phil Pappas is not a part of this task force, but he did an amazing amount of research. And I'll just share a few things with you. That of about the 20,000 cities and towns in the U.S., about all but 1,000 have populations under 40,000, and they almost all have struggling downtowns. I mean, we are not alone. And the good news there, though, is that we don't have to start from scratch. I mean, first of all, right here in Bennington, we have so many good initiatives going on, a lot of different moving parts, people trying to do their best to really make things happen. And the other side of it, though, is we can look to other towns and see what's worked for them, and we can cherry pick from their successes and add our own Bennington twist to those. So where are we now? We took this booklet of about 45, it's a working list of ideas that each of the select board members got I think it was last May maybe that you got this. And so if you see on the right-hand side on the task force, there's Betsy Woods, Teresa Maynard, and myself, but we didn't know where to go with it. So we went to Tom Jacobs and said, which direction should we go? And he hooked us up with Dan Monks, Zerwat Chowdhury from the town, John Shanahan, Mike McDonough from the Bennington Downtown Alliance. And that was really crucial because they had a really good insight into what's been done, what great things are already going on with Sparks or Bennington in Bloom and some of the other initiatives, so we don't just reinvent the wheel. And more recently, we've had the great addition of David Reese from Bennington College, which has been a wonderful addition to the team. We also have the support of Madison Brewing Company downtown, which is great to have a downtown partner, even though a lot of this is the initiative of outside people trying to help be a part of downtown. So the idea is to weave new momentum into existing initiatives, into startups and new ones. We get that it's not the scale of the Putnam block, which we think is game-changing, but that small wins add up. So I'm just going to run through a lot of pictures now. The boring part's over. We're going to get to the fun part. And we took the 45 ideas and said, well, we can't do them all, so let's find some what we're calling demonstration projects. So we have a few strategies with the corresponding demonstration projects. A couple of the ones I'm sharing with you are more long-term, but there are 4 short-term ones that we're going to dive in and get to as quickly as we can. And the fundraising kickoff is right now. So the first strategy is to create a sense of arrival. When you arrive in the downtown, we want to provide visual cues that clearly delineate our historic downtown district. The idea is to create a sense of place. So pole banners can really effectively do that. You see pole banners that don't announce an attraction or an event, it's just that you have arrived in our historic downtown. Another longer term one is to increase our footprint of the historic gas lamps. I mean, they look amazing, and so over time, especially talking to you, the select board, like let's look for opportunities that we can expand that over time. One of our immediate projects that we're really very deep in right now is to light up our downtown. So you will see shortly that we will have string lights, winter lighting on probably about 30 to 40 trees downtown. It kind of depends on the size, but we've mapped them out. And the idea is this also creates a sense of place that you have arrived in your downtown district. Something's happening here. 70% of all consumer retail spending happens after 6 p.m., and we really want to create a sense of vibrancy in the evening hours. You can see what an impact that can have on a downtown. I do want to point out from this picture that our trees are not that symmetrical, as you may have noticed.
Why not keep those lights on year-round?
Honestly, we wanted to do that, but there's a problem with tree growth. But I'll show you another picture. We're going to look at doing uplighting in the summertime. So this would be winter, and then in the summertime, we're meeting actually with RPI Lighting Institute tomorrow, which is a very exciting opportunity that they're going to come in and share some of their wisdom with us on uplighting. And so that would switch over to uplighting in the summertime, but good question. So our winter trees are going to look more like the branch wrap style trees. And you can see also, it really does provide some function. You can see how bright that sidewalk is there. It really helps light up the downtown. And then this is a picture of uplighting. So that's what we would switch over to in the summer. It would be much easier if we could just leave the string lights up year-round, but it is a little bit of a logistical issue. This next one is something we're looking to try to work with the retailers with. We have many retailers downtown who have perpendicular blade signs, but you can see what an impact it is if many of the retailers downtown and the shops and restaurants have blade signs. If you're driving down this street in particular, you would just see a bunch of buildings, but if you're driving down the street and you see these perpendicular blade signs, you don't even need to turn your head. You can see that there's something happening here. Carson, did you have a question?
Can we interject with questions as we go?
Sure.
Just one quick thing.
Sure, that's it.
I don't just want to lose thought on it. If you, on the signs, when you're looking to go perpendicular to buildings, you might want to connect to the building owners too, because they might be willing to help share the costs with the retailers.
Oh, that's a great point.
It's just something where it's a benefit to all of us. I mean, the
Yeah,
more,
yeah.
is there,
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think part of what we're looking to here as our group is to kind of look at the sign regs, see where there are any little hiccups that are preventing people from doing this. Part of it, I know I'm a small business owner, it's just time and energy. And so we're going to look to do a little bit of the legwork to help people be able to convert to perpendicular blade signs, not necessarily looking to pay for perpendicular blade signs, but to do some of that legwork. Here's the hardware you need, here's all the specs, et cetera, to help people do that. And you can see, yeah, sure.
How would that affect our sign ordinance for the town of Bennington?
It complies.
Yeah, I think we have the sign ordinances. We haven't quite tackled this one in detail yet, but we are looking at there are some, I guess, maximum square feet that you can have of signage. And so we're going to be looking at some of that and seeing if there are areas we might need to come to the select board for modifications. But I think we can do a lot within what we already have. Yeah. You can see what an impact this has. This is a Nantucket streetscape. So our idea is to just provide the turnkey information to help people better our downtown signage. The third strategy is to just draw in the would-be passerbys with eye-catching streetscapes and retail curb appeal. Successful downtowns put significant energy into their retail curb appeal. And the idea here is to extend the exterior spaces out into the sidewalk with artful displays. We're not talking clearance carts and that kind of thing, but just artful displays. But the other thing that's so important here, if you look at these pictures, is that the benching, the topiary planters, the awnings, those all soften that transition between the building and the sidewalk. And that makes a big difference in catching people in, kind of catching them into your web. They see all this going on. And so one of our first, of the first 4 demonstration projects is to put the facade planters up against the buildings downtown. Bennington and Bloom does a wonderful job with the hanging baskets and some of the sidewalk planters, and we want to expand that, build on that, and put these facade planters. You can see this one on the left is the Elm Street Market. It really catches your eye as you go by. You can see on the right, they've really done it all, from the gooseneck lighting to the awnings to the historical gas lamps to the facade planters and the topiary planters. So what an impact retail curb appeal can have. You can see how it's done, this is Quebec City, how it really can have an impact when you do all of these elements, and we're just trying to pick them off one at a time. The next one that we're going to be working on as a demonstration project is the implementing a system of wayfinding signs. We're going to be improving what we have and expanding what we have, starting at the edge of town, historic downtown 1 mile, or historic downtown ahead. We have a lot of key amenities. We have pretty good parking. We have restrooms downtown, which I didn't even know that. We have bike racks. We have an electric charge station. We need to make sure that people are finding these things. You can see that bathrooms are the #1 reason that people stop in a downtown. We want to make sure that they find ours, because when they're down there, then they're going to pop into Naps, they're going to pop in and get a yogurt, they're going to pop in and get a sandwich. And you can see how uninviting no public restrooms is, and how inviting it is to say public restroom right around the corner. So in addition to wayfinding signs, we would also look at be doing some placards for shop windows. This is a long-term one, but since it was such a popular one, we really don't want to lose it on our radar. And that is to provide visual cues that our downtown district is alive and buzzing and family-friendly. And the best way to do that is to build an awesome downtown playground. Small to mid-size in caliber, or in scale, but high in caliber. And this is consistently linked to, as a key element in successful downtowns. So we would want to obviously coordinate with the Sparks project as this eventually gets off the ground, but we really wanted to point out that this is a really key element. So this is a little tiny town of 1,300 people, and they totally revitalized their waterfront with a really terrific car ferry themed playground. So it doesn't have to be big or expensive, it just has to be really unique. So we're here tonight because I think for everyone that's here, for the select board, for people at home, really we all can make it happen through your enthusiasm, through just a positive word of mouth, through your community leadership, and through contributions. From a babysitter who wants to send in their $10 or their allowance money to, we have companies and individuals that can do $500 or $5,000. I mean, I think we're all in this together. This is just obviously one program of many that people can contribute to, but we hope that they will consider it. We do have a goal of $101,000. The Bennington Downtown Alliance, formerly the BBC, is our financial custodian, so we do have the 501c3 status. And the money immediately goes to work. We're immediately pouring money into tree lighting, and then the pole banners, and the wayfinding signs, and the facade planners. So as much money as we raise is what we will do. And I'm very, very pleased to announce that we are just beginning our fundraising. We've had some one-on-one meetings with some companies. We've just sent out a few little handwritten notes to our friends and neighbors, and we're sending out more and more as we go. But we've come out of the gate strong. So our early individual supporters through today, and this is just in literally the last 30 days, is Southern Vermont Medical Center. I mean, Tom D. and Kevin Daly were incredibly enthusiastic and generous. Bank of Bennington, Jim Brown, very, very supportive. TAM Waste Management, Trevor Mance, didn't even blink an eye, just what do you want, where do I write the check to? I mean, it's just been fantastic. Sheila Harden at Bennington Potter is very much the same way, just very supportive. Bennington College, like I mentioned before, they did write a check, but also David Reese is now on our task force, which is very, very helpful. This is a downtown one, but Madison Brewing Company, very, very supportive. Price Chopper, obviously Four Chimneys Inn, Hampton Inn, Knotty Pine, we are 3 of the founding members, so of course we opened our checkbooks. Mount Anthony Country Club with Maru being a designer really helped us with our design elements. Home Depot with gift in kind as far as materials. Enterprise Rental Car helping us with the van to go pick up some of those materials. And then individuals. Oh, I want to back up here. So of these first ones, they've ranged from $1,000 to $5,000 from the various corporate sponsors to date, with a lot of promise of more to come in the future. And then we've just mailed out to a few friends and neighbors, and we're obviously just kicking that off, but we've had tremendous support, and most of these have ranged from $100 to $500, but we really want to emphasize that anyone that has $20 or $25, I mean, we're hoping for broad participation, because the idea is we all should really share in the downtown. And the last thing for individuals, Zerwatt was very wonderful and put up a GoFundMe page. And we just put it up, I think 2 days ago or 3 days ago, and we hadn't announced it yet, but we already got 2 donations and we have $250. So we're very, very pleased with that. So I don't know if we have any questions, but we really thank the Select Board for the opportunity. And I know you had all read this original document, and thanks to the people who originally had all these good ideas, because they certainly weren't all mine.
Any questions for Lynn tonight, or is it just, let's join in the...
I have one question. What about changing the colors of the crosswalk? That's an eye-catcher. To go from baby blue to maroon, the baby blue looks pretty good. I know there's stipulations transportation color in the state of Vermont, but obviously when we're coming into downtown on a crosswalk, we've got a compass at the four corners.
Yeah, you know what, I forgot to mention the compass at the four corners. That was a tremendous idea that Polly had, that just dug in and got it done. That's terrific. And that's why I want to emphasize that this is a working list, and every time I'm with a group, I write down these ideas, so thank you for that idea. And I'm sorry, I'm very sick tonight.
I think Dan set up the presentation with your enthusiasm prefaced very well. We're fortunate to have you and your fellow organizers, because this is an organization that's sort of like all of a sudden was planted and starting to take root. As a select board, all we can do is enthusiastically encourage, and as far as using community resources, we have resources that we'll be using in context, and I think when we have our budget sessions and we look at where we're spending the town's money, we should be looking at these ideas as ways of getting the best bang for our buck. And I think that's what we're sort of doing now.
Well, I appreciate that, because one of the things that is so tremendous about having someone like Dan and Mike McDonough and John on the task force is that even as we're, I don't know, whatever you're doing with the sidewalks, if you're thinking about electricity near a tree base, or you're just thinking through these kind of things with some of these in mind, it's really helpful, because if we're planning ahead, or even when we're doing the replanting of the trees, it all of a sudden made us think about, what some of these trees are really difficult to light and some are easy to light, and it's just helpful to be thinking ahead, and that's what Dan's been very tremendous on that.
Great.
So, and also I do want to say that the town is participating not only through Zerwatt and Dan's time, but also the electricity, which is of great benefit, although we're doing LEDs, so it'll be nominal cost on the lights.
Yeah, Chad, go ahead.
Well, I just want to offer two things if I can. I really appreciate everything you're doing. I'm really energized by your energy. But I have access to about 40 to 50 football players that will
They need exercise.
usually if I ask them to do something, they'll do it, and we're always looking for ways to help volunteer and teaching these ways kids about a way of giving back. So if there's anything, the football team, you need help lighting, if it's hanging the lights, let me know. I can probably get at least half of them to come and help out.
Start tomorrow morning, 9 a.m.
Well, unfortunately, they do have school, but weekends or after school, we'll do that. But personally, I would like to help. I've received a thing in the mail. I'd like to donate my January select board check and put a little challenge out to the community. If we can, the check's about $100 I get, so if we can get about 10 more of those by the end of January, I'll donate my February check as well.
Wow, thank you. That's amazing.
Putting him on the spot.
He's setting the bar kind of high.
Good for you. Good for you. Where are we in getting the lights?
Oh, it's been wonderful. The challenge of this whole committee starting in about late June is that people order their lights like a year in advance. And so it's been a challenge, but through the help of Jameson at Home Depot, who really did some good research for us and donated some lights, and then John driving, we found some, and he drove all the way to Philadelphia with the Enterprise Renovan that was very generously donated, and came home with about 1 million gazillion lights. So we do have lights for this year. But next year, Jameson's going to help us do it a little more smoothly. Although a lot of these last like 7 to 8 years, so the cost is up front.
So does that mean that the tree lighting piece of this is, are you at the number of trees that you want to light, or?
Yeah, we did some sample trees, some test trees, and based on that test, we should be able to do 30 to 35 trees, because they're all different sizes and a little different shape. That's the other good news, is that we just really started this fundraising. We don't even have all of our mailers out to individuals, and we're already at 25,000. So we're really excited by the excitement. And now, Chad, seriously, that kind of challenge is what we need, are those kind of matching challenges and that kind of thing will really, and I think participation from everyone, small, big, whatever you can do is really, really, and now people are going to be afraid to run into me on the street, I know that. That's
No,
okay.
but so, Lynn, so does that mean that if you have met your goal for tree lights, are we now moving on to pole banners? I mean, is this the order in which?
Yeah,
things are
so
happening?
Yep, we do tree lights, we get a critical mass of tree lights, we move on to the pole banners, because really, those two kind of go hand in hand for a winter lighting project to have the banners there. And then the wayfinding signs, the first 5,000 we have goes to wayfinding signs, and then if it's 10, if it's 15, I mean, we've got a list of 101,000, but we're trying to work our way up so that we have critical mass on each of these.
That's great.
So we might not make it to all 4, but we're really confident that pretty sure we will.
What's really appealing is that this is not the Putnam project, like you said, scale.
Small scale.
And that takes time, which we all are learning about. Patience. You don't have to have a lot of patience to get these projects up and rolling. And I can just see them ticking off one after the other with that effort.
Well, and I think the Putnam project was really the first example of kind of taking ownership from all of the community into downtown, from outside of downtown into downtown. And that it really set the example, and then now doing this on a smaller scale, but it should be a pretty visible scale.
Great.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much, Lynn. Thank you. And contact information will be available through the town?
Well, because the Better Bennington Corporation, the Bennington Downtown Alliance, is our financial custodian, we have a page on their website.
Okay.
And then we do have the GoFundMe/Grow Bennington.
Okay.
And, yeah.
Yep. And I'm sure the banner will be picking up.
Yeah, it's just calling our office.
Yeah.
It's the phones are there.
Yeah.
And the website does have all the contact.
Ready to go?
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's great.
And I'll up you January and February.
Oh, we like it. Thank you.
We'll have to go off the record. We'll have to go into executive session on that. Next item on the agenda, we're going to talk about our charter a bit. Would you need a break? Would you like a break? Yeah, we'll take about a 5-minute break, not a long break. Okay. That's encouraging. Okay, thanks. The next item on the agenda is to take on the Charter Committee's report in a further discussion. By way of background, the report of the Charter Review Committee was presented to the board on December 22nd, 2017. It was a compilation of summary and work, and you can see from the work product that this was not done lightly. There's a lot of time, energy, and I'm really proud of myself for suggesting most of these individuals who took it upon themselves. I apologize for Dan and anyone else that's here for if you got the call. But the work of this committee was really strong. They've not only presented us with the report, but background on how they got here. And our prerogative is to take the report and say, thank you very much, take it and review it and say, take parts of it, or take it as it is in whole cloth. I don't think we'd be doing the public the job that we are expected to have to take. Because while the committee's report is done and we review it, there are going to be hearings on this report, and our recommendations will eventually get to the public. And under present law, the legislature gets to accept the charter as revised. Although there's some discussion at the legislative level, I hope this session that maybe Stu probably can speak to it.
Finish your thought, Tom, but I
whether or not
I doubt that it'll get very far.
It won't during our lifetime, right?
Perhaps in our lifetime.
Yeah. Is that the charter would, if it's passed by the community, would be automatically approved unless the legislature took certain steps not to accept it. So it just seems like there's a lot of redundancy built in, but I think we're at the grassroots level of taking this charter and making it, as the committee did, making it a living, viable document that's clean and clear with grammatical errors that have been carried forward for years and years that Gene's probably not going to have to spend a lot of time on. And what we want to do is parcel the discussion out. As I said earlier, we've got the report, but it's accompanied with executive summaries of each section and how the committee arrived at their recommendations. So what I'd like to do tonight is, using the executive report part of the document and then sort of cross-referencing to the charter. I don't think we have to spend a lot of time on a lot of areas because A, the committee's already done that, or two, it wasn't necessary even by on the committee's standards to spend a lot of time. But there are some matters of substance which I think will draw us into discussions on maybe on how the committee arrived at its recommendation and whether or not we should take that recommendation and give it to the general public. So tonight we're going to be looking at just a couple of sections, and it's basically, if you've got the report that came to you, it's under the substantive recommendations, Chapter 1, Section 102 is on page 3 of the report that was given to us. And what we'd like to do is just look at the Subchapter 1, Section 102, the additional town powers. And Stu and Dan were at the meetings, but the essence of it, as far as Section 102, that section enumerated certain powers relating to enforcements and ordinances, and there was a discussion, I believe, that the changes in Section 302 would effectively eliminate 102 because it basically puts it all into one section.
It was actually a consolidation. Initially, the charter referred to powers of the town, and then 302 refers to powers of the select board. And the committee felt that many of the powers that were given to the town were really powers that the select board exercises. And so there was a consolidation of those efforts to try to bring them under one section instead of the duplicate effort, so to speak. And would it be helpful? We have 3 charter review committee members sitting in the audience. Maybe they'd want to come up to the table and participate?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that would be great. I didn't want to make you, they've always spent so much time and energy. I didn't want to make you have to do it again. But Dan, step up as needed.
Somebody. Well, we'd at least get a look at your face, Dan.
Yeah. And Lynn's back, and Robert, and Dan. Thank you again for all the effort. We'd be all over the place without your work product, and we'll still be all over the place, but at least we'll have some guidance to get to where we need to go. And it's interesting, on page 2 of the actual charter, 102 has been deleted in its entirety.
Correct.
So and is there any question to the board or to the members of the committee that are here tonight relative to that? Seems pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I mean, I do want to say, I do appreciate the addition and the preamble to say the charter of the town reflects concern to improve the quality of life for all people and to improve the operation of town government. I think that's
And that language actually appears at the very end of the charter in the subchapter about the Charter Review Committee. That is kind of the general charge given to the committee, is to look at it towards a view of improving the operations of the town. So we thought, because the preamble specifically mentions reviewing the charter, we thought that language should be brought up to the beginning of the document as well.
Makes sense. Makes sense. The next section was the recall, and that section was basically a clarification, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah, there weren't any real changes to the recall provisions.
Yeah.
What was the conversation around the 15 days, getting rid of the 15 days? Was there any trepidation about there being an unlimited period of time during which that could happen?
The crux of the discussion was we could not quite figure out what the phrase "its issue" meant. It says within 15 calendar days of its issue. We couldn't figure out quite what that phrase meant. We didn't know if that's 15 days from the last signature, 15 days from when it's delivered to the town, and so we ultimately decided it would be clearer simply to take that 15 days out, because we couldn't quite make sense. And please jump in if I'm not saying this right.
That's exactly right.
So the phrase, we couldn't figure out what it meant, so we took out that, the 15-day stipulation to try to make it simpler.
That's what you need on that, Tom?
Yeah,
because I think there's no definition of what actually recall would be predicated on.
Right, we weren't sure that when a petition is sought, if there's any issue date, does the town clerk issue the actual papers? And that, we didn't know that process, and I don't think there is a process like that.
I see.
The section on appointed officers, I think the major area there was we don't have a constable anymore.
That's correct. And the Charter Review Committee followed up on the fact that we have not had a constable appointed here in a number of years. The charter required it, so thanks to the committee, we're eliminating that position.
Was there some piece about the state's going to require constables be
Well,
hired
constables are being required to meet higher and higher standards, and part of that, it means that they will now be required, or at least it was being considered. I don't know that it's come to pass yet, but they're going to be required to go to the part-time police academy. They're actually going to have to be part-time certified officers of the law, and we already have 26 sworn police officers in our community. We didn't think we needed a part-time, and haven't needed a part-time constable for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Right. And under section 203 compensation, there was no indication of any change, but it says compensation is to be paid to the select board members shall be set by the voters at the town meeting. And I was really hoping that Chad would be doing that.
He'd just give it all away.
So I think we're all set on that. Then we do get into the select board under chapter 3 areas. Again, a lot of this was to clean up the obvious, the redundancies, and the terminology that was really stale.
I mean, historically, the charter was drafted, well, Tom, you clerked with the gentleman, Norton Barber. Drafted the charter back in probably 1968. It was voted on in 1969 when the village and the town merged. We wanted to have a charter for the new governing structure. And so a lot of the language was that old-time legalese that made its way into a lot of legal documents. And I think the committee did a great job in ferreting that out and cleaning it up and making the document more modern.
And we did run this specifically by Jim Barlow, our lawyer, and he concurred with this, with combining these.
Great. Section 302, the additional powers of the select board to adopt, did I jump over one? No, I didn't. To adopt ordinances. The committee recommended the inclusion of the statutory definition of solid waste to clarify the power of the town, which is something that's been evolved over time, I think, hasn't it?
Actually, the state law has changed dramatically over probably the 40 years I've been working for the town. And so I think it is updated, it's in the now, and I think that's important.
The section 302.5, additional powers of the select board to adopt ordinances. The committee recommends that the powers enumerated in 102 relating to construction be incorporated into 302, and that's what we just talked about, combining those. In the current charter, the ability to establish minimum standards for plumbing, heating, and wiring is limited to preventing hazard or damage or danger. The committee recommends that limitations on this power not be limited to mere hazard or danger. So that reads now, relating to the construction, alteration of public and private buildings and the use thereof, including establishment of minimum standards for plumbing, heating, and wiring. By deleting the specific reference to preventing hazardous, dangerous conditions, you're basically covering the waterfront, right? Rather than trying to. Okay. Again, if I'm speaking inconsistent with what the.
No, you're doing great.
Okay, good. Thanks. Jumping to subchapter 3, I know I'm missing the previous one, but I think that's dealt with already. On page 4 of the summary, subchapter 3, section 302.9, additional powers of the select board to adopt ordinances. The committee indicated that they recognize the vast array of technological advancements and societal changes since the last charter review some 13 years ago. 12 years ago, I guess it is. That may provide challenges for our local government. They discuss the impact of potentially intrusive advances, including Uber, Airbnbs, thank you very much. Urban chickens? I mean, I look around those every day. And drones, et cetera, e-cigarettes, all of these things which who knew even back, less than a year ago, that if they were in existence. And this is so that the select board has the power to regulate what it defines as intrusive or inappropriate activity. Is that fair to say? Then we get into one that may take a little bit of discussion under subchapter 3, section 303.1, further powers of the select board. Again, on page 4, the committee met with members of the Bennington Fire Department on a couple of occasions. In addition, 2 deputy chiefs attended 2 charter review committee meetings and spoke to the public comment portion of the meeting with regard to a volunteer versus paid fire department. The committee, in looking to the future, when there may be a need to pay certain members of the fire department, wanted to write language into the charter that would allow the select board to pay volunteers if necessary, and at the same time keep the autonomy of the fire department. And if you go to that section in the proposed, which is
Page 6.
Page 6. The additional language was, the department shall be volunteer, quote, unless an affirmative vote of the majority of the members of the fire department authorizes a transition to a paid or a combination paid and volunteer department as set forth in a transition plan proposed by the select board, working with a committee formed from members of the fire department, period. When I first looked at that, I'm going, yeah, what? Why, what, and how?
I think this is a good one for Bob.
Is this our cue? Okay. I'm glad we had time to get to this because I'm actually quite proud of this recommendation. One, because what I hope it does, but 2, how we came about it. Just a little background. In my life experience in other places I've lived, I've seen volunteer departments where their communities have grown, that the needs of the community have changed. I've seen volunteer departments go to what's commonly called combination or part paid departments. Oftentimes they find they define a need, say, to pay drivers to be at the station, to staff the station 24 hours to respond quicker, things like that. There are other reasons, but that's basically what I'd seen. So when I was going through the charter, my own review of it before we started, and I saw this, I thought maybe there's an opportunity here to make slight change. So I brought it up in a meeting, and everyone seemed to think it was a pretty good idea. We voted, okay, let's look into that, and we knew that, you know, we're going to have to try to get some input, at least from the fire department. And that's one reason I'm so proud of this. So we did this. It was in the banner, one of their articles about this. At one of our public information forums, we were approached by members of the fire department. I think 2 of the 3 chiefs came up and said they'd kind of like to talk about this a little bit. Lynn, me, Rob Plunkett, we went to a meeting of the firefighters to talk about this, and we heard a lot from them, their concerns about going in this direction. After that meeting, our 2 co-chairs, Sean Marie Aller and Rob Plunkett, met with the chiefs of the department and discussed this concept and kind of hammered out some language that seemed more acceptable to the fire department. We sent that to our lawyer, Jim Barlow. A couple of the chiefs from the department came to one of our meetings where we were able to talk about it a little bit more. Our lawyer forwarded some language to us that he thought would you know, meet what we're trying to do. We sent that to the fire chiefs. They took that to their membership. Their membership discussed it. And with a couple of tweaks of that language, decided that this would be something that, I say support, I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but they seem okay with it. And then at one of our last meetings, we took the language that they had tweaked, and we tweaked it a little more. And in fact, Donald Campbell helped. I think you put in a word, and Stu got up there on the big board, and then we all worked and finally came up with this language. And why I'm so proud of this is I think this is exactly how a process like this is supposed to work. You know, it came from the committee. We talked about it. We had information forums. Through those, we got input. We were able to sit down with actual real stakeholders and learn what their concerns were. We worked out language that would hopefully will benefit the town, which is the ultimate charge of the committee, is to improve the operation of town government. What I really want to point out in this is, if this gets all the way to the legislature and it gets approved by everybody, it in effect makes no immediate change at all to anything. The default for the town of Bennington is a volunteer fire department. 200 years from now, we may still have a volunteer fire department. It does not require any change. It simply gives the town, the select board and the fire department, the ability, if the day comes that you see things have changed and someone decides it might behoove the town to have some paid position, it gives you the opportunity to have that discussion. The way the charter is written today, you can't even talk about it. It has to go to the legislature. So this is just a tool. It's just a way for everyone to sit down. Probably, I would say the main concern of the firefighters was the autonomy of the fire department. So that's why we've got this language that essentially the firefighters would have to vote to want to pursue this and then come to the select board. Now, ultimately, it's always up to the select board. You might say no. I mean, you might decide it isn't somewhere that you want to go. But they would be bringing it to you. And if you decided at some point it was a good idea, this then requires you to sit down with the fire department and work out the nuts and bolts of how you would come, how you would create some paid positions. So that's the background.
And I would like to point out that we didn't choose to change the opening phrase, the opening clause there. The select board still would have the authority to, from time to time, organize and reorganize the department. So it's just adding that one small input from the department itself if there were to be paid positions or part paid.
Right. But the genesis of that could come from either party, but the vote has to come from the fire department.
True, the select board could always approach the fire department and say, what do you think about this?
Yeah.
But but they'll have to give you an answer.
And if they say, we like it just the way it is, and there's questions of quality of service at that particular point in time, what do we do?
I wouldn't even pretend to be able to tell you. This is simply, the way the charter is written now, you can't even have that conversation without going through the legislature. This simply allows the town at some point in the future to have this conversation.
I guess you could always look to the last paragraph.
The last paragraph.
The select board shall have authority to continue any existing contract with a volunteer department.
Oh, yes, of
or to
one.
enter on behalf of the town into contract with another volunteer department.
Yeah.
I guess
That's
it's,
all current
you know,
language.
Yeah, it's current.
Yeah.
But
Right, it's in there now.
Right. That's the alternative.
that's the alternative, yeah. So I think, it's a real good, it basically codifies what future could be, and it brings
And we worked
everybody
hard
to
on
the
it.
table.
This
Which is
was
good.
one of the items that we spent more time
Then-
than I
then-
expected initially.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, me too.
And it kind of fits with, just, we tried to be forward-thinking in everything, given that the last time this was looked at was about 13 years ago. So kind of ties back to the drones and urban chickens and Airbnbs and Ubers and solar panels. I mean, there are things that we don't know what we don't know for 10 years from now. So that's where we tried to look.
Done a good job of crystal balling it. I think this is probably a very good one.
Did you speak to the membership at large of the fire departments, or was it really just the chiefs you were?
No, yes, we did. I'm not sure what that meeting was. There was a lot of food here. I don't know if it was an annual meeting or what, but most of the firefighters were here. This wasn't just talking through, the hierarchy of authority. We talked to the whole group for a while.
The department meets monthly as a unit.
And I haven't been to one of those meetings, but is it a safe meeting where a person would feel safe dissenting in that format?
Within that department, yes.
Okay. Yeah, right. What you can do, fire me?
Yeah, that's right.
Good point.
Okay. All right. Well, the seems like the bottom line is the department shall be a volunteer department unless.
Yeah. And before, we didn't have any unless of opportunities.
Right.
Yep.
We're trying, a lot of, and Lynn just kind of mentioned it, a lot of our approach to this was the charter should be a tool to run the town, not an obstacle to run the town. And some of these changes we've made, we're not changing a thing. We're trying to give the town the ability to deal with things. Like Lynn says, things change so fast these days, it's hard to keep up. So we didn't want the charter standing in the way of when, you folks need to make decisions.
And then you moved on to probably another interesting area of discussion relative to the organization of the select board and the like, that the committee spent time discussing the structure of the town government. The committee considered formally submitting public comments, various discussions in and around the community, and current mayoral petition in circulation. So you had the benefit of a lot of stuff. The committee examined 3 types of town government: strong mayor, weak ceremonial mayor, and town manager/select board form. Ultimately, the committee focused on the town manager/select board form of government, with 4 substantial modifications designed to improve the operation of town government. That sounds like a familiar phrase. And to address the concerns of some citizens that have expressed for more formal leadership and accountability in town government. The 4 recommendations modifications are listed in this section, in section 304 and 304G, 304H, and 401 below. So going right to those, before we even get there, why don't you just give us some more flavor of that discussion? And because it looks like you did take great pains to try to get as much input from the various folks that had maybe different interests in the process, and tried to blend them to the extent you could.
You guys want to jump in?
Well, just to speak to the different interests, I'll say that just within the committee itself, there were a lot of different opinions on where along that continuum we should be. But I would say that we were much more centered than some of the things that we've heard and read in the banner. We felt that the strong mayor form of government was just probably had too much power invested in a single individual. I think as a group, that's pretty safe to say. Yes. But we also heard the cries from people in town for more vision and more leadership, and we're trying to address that.
And I think, too, we recognize that there is a mechanism to change to a mayoral form of government, and that mechanism is the petition. So we didn't feel like it was our place to really change that. There already is a mechanism for that. So when we looked at, we really spent a lot of time on this strong mayor versus weak mayor versus our current form, and we felt our charge was to optimize government as far as for the benefit of the town, and that's really where our focus needed to lie is we've got this mechanism now that's the select board / town manager system, and how do we listen to this feedback and make that more impactful or run more smoothly.
And I would also say they're almost kind of like two issues. It's the form of town government is one issue, and I believe I'm correct in saying there's universal consensus on the committee that the council manager form of government is best for Bennington. It's the best way to run a town at least of this size, but much larger towns and cities use that same form of government. There didn't seem to be any interest at all in changing the way the town is governed that way, and that's what takes you to strong mayor, having one person who somehow makes all the decisions for the town. We didn't see that as a way to go. Most of our conversations were more about the kind of ideas of leadership, vision, things like that, and as to whether or not an elected position would bring more, having what we call a weak mayor, the ceremony, having someone run for mayor, giving a vision to the voters. But I think we all kind of figured, well, you all do that. When you run for select board, you're giving your vision of the town. So I think that's already being served. So we stayed away from creating a new elected position, and then took a closer look at the position of chair of the select board and talked about, is there any way, do we have any way of bringing these elements, vision, leadership, things like that, into the positions we already have. And I don't know if we're there yet, but 304A, talking about the chair, was actually quite a long conversation, and with a lot of different opinions on that, whether we should, you can call it opportunity, responsibility, I don't know, giving this to the position of chair as ceremonial head of the town. I have to be honest, I don't know if any of us really know what it means yet. We're kind of intrigued to see what's going to happen. Does that mean the chair has to go to every ceremonial event that anybody ever comes up with, or
you better get a day
does
job
the chair get to decide, what's important, what's not important? You guys are going to are really going to craft this, and I'll say one other thing. This language is already in several charters throughout the state, so it's already got the seal of approval from the legislature. They've approved this language in other.
Do you remember any of the communities that have that language already?
I don't think I've got it here.
That's
We
right.
had, it was like 8 or something, or half a dozen.
Well, because I was wondering, sort of the flip side, were there some, it seems interesting, a chair already has extra responsibilities, a lot of extra responsibilities. But you have a board of people who are able to sort of spread out the good wishes, of the community. And so what
There's 7 of us. There's 7 of us.
Right. Were there any charters that said, and the board should, as a group, should be the ceremonial head? Or, sort of, I'm intrigued by the idea of there needing to be that one front person while also I don't know, sort of endorsing the idea of having a board.
I think the one reality that we really wanted to face was that each of you, I assume, has full-time work outside. None of you are making a living off of your select board.
No.
stuff.
I did.
But you're right. And we talked about even potentially some specifics, like a chair's budget or something like that. But it dawned on us the select board has the power to do that already during their own budgeting process. So if they chose to do that, that is something that you could use as a tool to help the chair implement some of the things that maybe he or she wanted to do and said they were going to do when they were running. So we tried to not really make it too specific because we didn't, again, we wanted to make as much allowance for the board to govern the town in a living way rather than having every single thing codified. We do also want to just have that kind of ceremonial thing. The governor visits the town, somebody should be maybe there for that type of event.
And if I can chime in on one other thing, is that in a town of our size, to have one person running for mayor, one of the things we talked about is having that stable of people to run for mayor. Like, one of the advantages of having a town manager is that the select board, which are representatives of the people, have the opportunity to look at the education, the work experience, and the performance of a town manager. So we tried to listen to the feedback of where citizens wanted more accountability, more visibility, and how we could fix that versus sometimes it sounds like a magic bullet to just have that one elected mayor that's going to be the visionary, but really we do have elected representatives currently, and there's a lot of accountability that can be had in having a hired position that is accountable to the select board. So we tried not to get our own opinions in it and not necessarily making a recommendation of a form of government, but stating that we felt that this was the one we wanted to focus on and that this is the one we could polish up to make better. But it's we've learned extremely complicated as far as even if a petition does come forth with mayor and then rewriting whose responsibility is what and how that all shakes out is really very, very complex and will need serious thought if that ever should come to pass.
And also, if I could add one more thing, we had decided against strong mayor. And you should understand, most of the evidence or data that we used is anecdotal. It's things we've brought into the meeting from our lives, our life experience. We didn't do a survey, anything like that, to get hard answers from the citizens. And I think it was, if not universal, close to it, that, because we're all talking to people about this by virtue of being on this committee. And many people brought up these ideas of leadership, vision, things like that. And we thought, at the end, can we give them nothing? Is there nothing we can offer to the citizens, to the people out there who are looking for something more than they feel they are getting right now? We didn't want to go strong mayor. We didn't want to make a radical change. And that change would have been wrong for this town, in our humble opinions. We thought this was a pretty, well, I think I got quoted in the paper, an innocuous and non-threatening way to try to address these concerns, these feelings about leadership and vision without making radical changes to the way we're running the town. And again, I know I am very eager to see how future chairpersons of the select board take this and what they do with it.
Well, and I think just a reminder to any citizens listening at home that we just did as much homework as we possibly could do. We were as thorough as we could be. We just put forth our recommendations, and then in the end, it's your decision to what you take to the voters and the voters to decide. So we are not the deciders here, we are the recommenders.
But we hear the same anecdotal stuff that you have and had to challenge and be challenged by. And so I think that's how it all fits into this mix, because, how come you weren't at that ceremonial situation, right. And somebody should have been there from the town, who was the face of the community, Again, we all have our day jobs, and if Stu went to all of the ceremonial meetings, he wouldn't be able to get his work done either.
Right.
So I think on the whole, we do a pretty good job. We don't formalize it maybe to the extent that we should or have it on a calendar, but on the whole, I think we get out into those meetings and the ceremonies pretty good. But there's a lot of them. But
I think we also all had the realization that running an organization like the town of Bennington requires an awful lot of regulatory compliance, and a professional manager is the way to handle that in a better way than an elected mayor who may only have 4 years of skin in the game, or maybe doesn't have the background, maybe has personality but not the background to run an organization like this.
yeah, I mean, we can have a mayor, I don't want to jump to the next agenda item, but we can have a mayor that's great at going to all the ceremonies and great at kissing babies and shaking hands and not running this town except into the ground.
Exactly.
And there's a real potential in that in this size of a community. But I guess the thing that sort of got my reactions is happened being the chair right now for all ceremonial purposes. You know, do we really need that statement? Does that really make a difference? I'm not sure if it maybe some folks think it might be, and maybe it makes that chair more sensitive to that responsibility more than I am or my predecessors, but I'm not sure.
I just wonder if it said that the chair is the head of town government for all ceremonial purposes and may delegate or in some way sort of took some of the, it feels like burden off of one individual.
Or maybe get rid of the word all.
Yeah.
Well, we went through each word of this document, and we would hope that you would go through each word of the recommendations.
But what you just said is
Fair.
very important. What this says is the chairperson is the head of government for all ceremonial purposes. It does not say the chair will go to every ceremony in town. If there's an event and you think the town should be represented and you can't go, yes, you delegate. You send, can you go? Can someone go in my stead? You may use this as an opportunity to develop other members of the select board, have other people go to these events, but we're hoping the chair will put thought into it, that we're talking about leadership, we're talking about vision. That's what this is about. The chair can interpret this however he or she wishes to.
You didn't think the addition, maybe didn't, it sounds like you considered it, but the addition of, or his or her designee or something would add to that, sort of gives that help or direction to that chair?
That would be your prerogative. I
You
think
could put that in
that's
there
an
if you
interesting
want.
thought, yeah.
Because that's, when I read that, I thought, or, because many organizations have the CEO, the face of the organization, and it says, or shall designate or delegate as he or she determines, you know.
Right, but you would not be able to delegate your responsibility as head of government for ceremonial purposes. You can delegate the tasks, the functions, but the chair would still be the head of government for ceremonial purposes. You can make what you want out of this. You can make nothing out of it if you're not that inclined. You can make a lot out of this. We're trying to make this a tool for you, not obstacles, not putting things in your way.
And we want to, for the next board, have that same vision and same idea, yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't say attend.
So no fear.
No fear. No fear.
Relax.
Good.
Good. We got your back.
Yeah.
It does seem like less is more in this situation, sort of the fact that you made it short and not very specific.
Believe it or not, we really tried to be very concise throughout this entire document.
I believe you, but this particular
We
sentence.
really did. And like I say, this language is approved by the state legislature. We didn't think this up. This came down from on high.
In other charters.
Where we
Yes,
could
in other
borrow, we
charters,
did.
yes.
Yeah,
And
because it's
Vermonters.
easier to pass.
Okay.
It is something I think we'll have to chew on
Yeah,
as
a bit.
a
Yeah,
board.
yeah,
and
I think so,
it's
too.
something we've identified as
Yep.
a place where we all could do better in terms of figuring out where we need to be around the town. I think we're getting better at it, but
Yeah.
we could get better yet.
Let's go right to the Select Board shall adopt rules of procedure for the conduct of its meetings. The board shall review the rules of procedure annually. Believe it or not, we actually adopted some. I think John was actually on the board. First go around. So we have rules, and it says shall be reviewed annually. The absence of review has been the controlling action. I think some of us, we all know we have rules of procedure that we're supposed to look at annually.
Relatively recent ones.
Yeah, they're pretty, like 2-3 years, but I think that's important that we do have them and update them so that they're reflective of the time and responsibility.
It feels like it'd be a good muscle to exercise every year.
Yeah, and it says that in our present rules, and we haven't exercised the muscle, so it's kind of atrophying.
And I appreciate it being in here, so it isn't just...
Yeah, that's right.
Because, you know, you care about it.
Yeah.
But in the future, people...
And it'll be consistent with every chair.
Yeah.
This one's sort of near and dear. If a select board member is absent from 4 consecutive warned select board meetings or is absent from more than 50% of warned select board meetings in any 6-month period, the member's office shall be vacant and the select board shall fill the vacancy in accordance with the replacement section 304C. Sometimes it gets to be a burden as things sat through some of those when meeting after meeting there are only 6 of us or 6 of the members there, and you know we're representative of 7 elected parties, so it didn't look like this such a high bar to meet.
This was another long conversation. We talked about this and I don't mean long like an hour. I mean, meeting after meeting. We sent this stuff to the lawyer, to get his opinion on this. We tinkered with the nuts and bolts, the numbers here, what made sense. It was a very long, involved discussion to get to this. This was a lot of work.
In the context of why they need it or what?
I think we pretty much understood a need for it, though we did have a discussion. Maybe someone's constituents is against the select board and they think he's doing a great job if he doesn't come, but we kind of put that aside.
That's a good point.
But again, it's about improving the operation of town government. The select board works best when you're all here. There are 7 of you for a reason. I've gotten my notes that I believe this was a recommendation from the current chair to look at this issue. So once we got to a consensus that we should have a clause in here about absenteeism, then we had to work out the nuts and bolts. How many meetings could you miss? Would all of you sit in judgment of someone? If someone had an illness and was off for 8 months, would you say, well, that's okay? Or, if you just moved to another town to take a job, we didn't want you to have to sit here in judgment of your peers. That's why we tried to put very specific numbers in here for you to use. But the bottom line is, we want the select board sitting here doing your job, and this was a way to try to help make sure that happens.
And it was even brought up that the replacement person appointed by the board could be the current incumbent whose seat was just vacated if there was such a compelling reason. So, I mean, that's still within the power of the select board.
I think we have a typo here, though, isn't it, in accordance with 304D?
It was probably originally C until they added A,
Yeah.
I was thinking the same thing.
Probably so.
Did you guys create this amendment matrix out of whole cloth, or did you find other municipalities who had adopted similar?
There were others with
language.
I say we sent it to the lawyer, and and then I don't mean to keep calling him the lawyer, Jim Barlow, and then he would send us his opinion based on his experience, but also he'd say, well, these towns do this, these towns do this, and we'd look at them and kind of craft what we thought would work best for the town of Bennington.
There were some that were surprisingly harsh.
Yes. Oh yeah. Yeah, harsher than this. Yeah.
So, okay.
Thank you. Did you consider adopting any? I'm sorry, I didn't bring mine. reminder with me, I left it at home. Did you consider adopting a clause that would excuse sickness?
Well, we discussed that as an issue, and, I mean, I can tell you specifically how I felt, so I don't even want to say if it was a consensus or not, but as I just mentioned, one, we don't want you sitting in judgment. The point is, we need a full select board doing the town's business, so whether you've been diagnosed with a terminal illness or whether you decided to take a job in another town, if you're not here, you're not here. And if you're not going to be able to be here and to do this job, we need to get someone in your place to keep the town running.
I think we appreciated the objectivity process versus the subjectiveness of having to sit down and say, yeah.
Maybe we should let them stay.
Yeah. It really says, that's the way it's written, and that's maintaining the efficiency of government. And if you only we have 7, we're fortunate, but some towns only have 2 or 3 member boards, or even 5. But it's still even hard to do business because there's so much business, but we're just 6 of us. We need everybody at the table.
Well, you can end up with a tie, too.
Yes, that's right. But
so in the event that we had someone who had met this criteria and needed to be dismissed or whatever, who is it? The citizens? Whose responsibility is it to keep track of that? And
then it goes right to 304, I think.
because it could be the chair that's the one who's missing.
Yep.
So it needs to be, the responsibility needs to probably come from fellow board members or even the public or maybe the town manager.
It would be noted in the minutes, and then if it became obvious, I think people would look to the minutes and see.
Yeah, okay. I just didn't know if it needed to be, whose responsibility it would be, should be determined or defined.
I think you bring up a very important.
Regardless of who counts the number of days or the number of months or the number of absences, this language makes it automatic.
Right.
You folks don't have to say, okay.
That I get.
So that, I mean, we all see the minutes. We all know who's here and who isn't. And I think the language really speaks for itself and leaves it truly objective. It's an objective decision. And when you run for office, you know that that's one of the issues that you have to deal with.
And we specifically tried to make it automatic and not have the board vote on the issue or something like that. We wanted to just make it by law, because the charter is a state law, that position is now vacant. And it's up to the select board to reappoint or to appoint someone to fill it. And who they choose to fill it, again, it's up to
And that's only until the next annual meeting.
Yeah.
That's a temporary
I guess I have one question. Would this include, I mean, it says warned select board meetings. Would that include special meetings and budget sessions? Because as of this Saturday, we'll have 4 consecutive meetings in 10 days, right?
Yes, so we specifically discussed that.
You're dead.
Yeah, I'm keeping track of that.
Carson's on thin ice.
And for no money, Chad.
John, when are you moving back?
It's prospective, this charter change. Doesn't go.
We don't have very many people call in, but did you talk about alternative technologies for coming to a meeting if you were sick, and in terms of?
There's nothing to preclude that.
Right,
Yeah,
but
so
I mean, I'm thinking when we had a call.
Absent.
No, but we did discuss that.
Considered absent,
Yeah.
they were considered present.
Yeah.
True.
We discussed that.
Good point.
Yeah.
John Boyd.
Seagulls in the background.
John called in.
Go ahead.
I think that's addressed somewhere in state
It's statute.
It is now, it's now permitted
Yeah.
for you to participate.
Skype
Or
or
conference call?
Scott, yeah.
As long as you know who's participating and they can understand what you're talking about.
And it does, I run into it on the league's insurance board on which I sit. When people participate by phone, it changes the way your voting is counted, because you have to vote by individual. It's not just everybody say aye. You have to go individual to individual, because the person on the conference call may not know who's voting and who isn't voting. So it changes the way you tally the votes, but that's about it.
Thanks for tonight. This is great.
Thank
The
you.
dialogue is really,
If I
I
can
think it's
mention
helpful.
2 more things real quick.
Yeah.
First, the report that we sent to the select board is available in its entirety on our webpage. We have a charter review committee. We have a page on the town's webpage, so people can go and look at everything that we sent you. And also, just to let you know, this Wednesday, the two co-chairs of the committee, Sean Marie Aller and Rob Plunkett, are going to meet over at the Cat TV studio, and they're going to tape about a 30-minute segment, I don't know what you call it, going through these changes just as a public education aspect, not in great detail, but these were the main changes we made, and kind of basically this is how we got to them. And then it won't be broadcast live, we're just going to tape it on Wednesday, and then we'll work it into the Cat TV programming schedule, so people will be able to see that, and might even spur them to come here while you're talking about it, if you're thinking about making changes. So we'll have that going for us.
It's really great that you came, and thank you so much for I hope you'll come as we continue to work our way through this for the rest of the winter, or some parts of your committee, because it's really helpful to hear your thinking.
Yes.
And thank you, everyone who's been sitting through this without getting too glassy-eyed. So I'd like to just read one little thing, which I hope will give everybody a smile, about the kind of stuff that you were having to deal with. I love that you had to change in this piece that gave select board powers to create departments not now existing, as opposed to creating departments that already exist.
Right.
Yeah.
There was a lot of wordsmithing.
We have the right to create departments not now existing.
I mean, we made changes to punctuation. We made changes, it made capital letters small letters. I mean, we really tried to proofread the document itself and to make sure it's as up to date as we could make it.
If you just did that, it probably would be a welcome service. But
We're going word for word.
Yeah, boy, we
that's
did.
great.
But in fairness, I mean, the bulk of the time was spent on the substance.
Yeah.
We joke
Right,
about
yes,
the punctuation,
yeah.
but it was substance.
Yeah,
again, thanks.
Great work.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
It's great. Thank you.
Thanks for everything tonight.
And thanks to town staff for all their support and assistance.
Yes.
Yes,
Nancy. The next item on this is the manager's report. If you have anything more to add,
Well,
I think you had a couple of items.
Yeah, I have one small action item which I noted in my manager's report, which is to circulate the 2018 Certificate of Highway Mileage. This is an annual event. We added no mileage to the town this year, and as is typical, the Vermont Agency of Transportation assumes there are only 3 select board members, so squeeze your names in on the sign, on the line there. That gets filed with the town clerk and with the agency. That determines how many dollars a year we get for our highway mileage. But it is an annual event. The second thing I have is I handed out at the beginning of the meeting, and I asked the chair and the vice chair if they would object to bringing this forward now because of the timing involved. As you know, we have a petition for a mayoral form of government, when individuals petition for a change in our charter, it changes some of the timelines that are required for hearings. It provides that the first hearing shall not be closer than 30 days to the vote, and that the second hearing shall be within 10 days of the first hearing. And of course, our meeting schedule doesn't line up very nicely with that kind of a time frame, because the closest we could get was February 6th, and then that would really push us way into the middle of February with the second meeting. Perhaps not enough time for people to react to the petition and to the changes. So I worked out a schedule here where we are proposing to hold 2 public hearings on this amendment at 6 p.m. here in the fire facility on Monday, January 29th, which is an off Monday for us. It's the 5th Monday of the month. Usually a Monday I look forward to. February 5th, which is the first Monday in February, but it is within 10 days of the 29th. And if you folks are willing to do so, Rob Wilmington has drafted the public hearing notice, and I have a signature page here. If you vote to hold the public hearings on those particular dates, I would circulate this for signature. It also allows us to get it posted in the paper and in the appropriate places about town.
Can I? Yeah, go ahead.
You first, please.
No, go ahead.
The meetings have to, I'm going to ask this, and I'm sorry if you just said it, but do they have to be 10 days apart? So
Yes.
So it's not a matter of they can't go...
It has to be within 10 days. It's not
Within-
exactly 10 days. It has to be within 10 days of the first meeting.
So I'm hearing you correctly, it doesn't have to be exactly 10 days apart, it can just be...
Just within that time frame.
Can they be back to back? Does it have to be, do I have to
On the
show
same
twice
night?
for this? Yeah, I mean, my point is, I don't want to seem disrespectful to this, but can we do them at the same time?
I can't do them at the
Open and
same
close?
time. No, there has to be two separate public hearings.
I understand.
I suppose you
How far do
could...
they have to be apart?
They can be no further apart than 10 days.
No, my point is, can they
How
be...
close can they be together? Can it be a 5-minute recess and then come back? I mean, is that the point you're trying to make, Carson? Could it be a 5-minute recess and then come back?
That's my point, I'm not trying to be facetious, I'm being serious.
I can't answer that question.
I'd vote for that if it's a yes.
Well, I
simply
don't know
can't
that
answer
I would. I mean, I think I do.
Frankly, I would love it if we could have them back to back on top of each other, because the essence of this is, it's not a process that we want to have to deal with, but it's thrust upon us. So I think we're stuck, and let's do it as the easy as we can, but not raise any questions or having some person be upset with our process that becomes more than one person, becomes a number of people upset. So let's try to stay within the context of it. Whether or not the 6 p.m., we could give another time if you'd like. I think we all feel the same way about
Is it a
being
Monday as well?
put on
Yeah,
both Mondays.
but I do think that it's useful to be able for this to be a serious
Discussion.
public hearing and discussion.
But do we have to come on 2 separate days? That's my only question. I'm wondering, can we do both of them in the same day?
I don't believe that would meet the intent of the law.
I don't think so.
I don't either.
But they,
Why don't we do this? Let's sign, and then you can check with Rob before you get it out tomorrow.
And if we can alter the time frame and do that, then I will be back with a revised warning on the 13th, which is Saturday. We'd have another opportunity to take a look at it.
I would say, Carson, as much as I agree with you, and that's what I'd like to do, I'm with Jeannie in that I think we should just hold 2 separate hearings on 2 separate days and be done with it. I really do. I would love to have a good conversation about a mayoral or a sort of a government structure conversation with this town, and I'd like it to take a year, to have a good long conversation about it. But I don't particularly. I think that
It's out of our hands at this point.
on this particular instance where somebody is petitioned, we just have to go through the motions of setting up two nights, would be my opinion.
And there will be a defined agenda on length of meeting?
This will be just it. This is it.
Essentially, as a public hearing, you would open the hearing, take comments from the public until such time as there aren't any, and then close the hearing.
Fantastic. That might be helpful. Again, this is an addition to the existing charter. I don't want the public to think that we're taking the Charter Review Committee and now we're going, this is not any part of it. This is a totally separate, distinct addition to the Bennington Charter. So, not something that we're proposing, it's by petition, which is allowed by statute. So, could I get a motion to notice the public hearings for those times and dates?
I would make a motion.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? All in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Is that everybody unanimous? Okay.
And that's all I've got. Thank you very much.
I need an executive session for a personnel matter, short, very brief one. It's appropriate to have it in executive session. Could we have a motion to that effect?
Motion to go into executive session for a personnel matter.
can we do no other business?
Oh, you want other business? You
Yeah, I
go
just-
right ahead. I'm sorry.
I just have a very quick question.
No, go ahead.
The
Other
Bennington
business.
Housing Authority,
Yes,
do we need to do anything?
Good question.
The purpose of the Boston office is to keep you folks informed as to what their findings are and to how that their work effort with the authority is proceeding in order to try to bring the authority back into compliance with the federal rules and regulations. At this point, I would say you don't need to act. We may somewhere down the line in the spring, want to talk with the board of the Housing Authority to see what actions they are planning to take or are taking on behalf of the Housing Authority in order to rectify some of the shortcomings you see here.
There's no financial implications?
Not for us, no.
That's all.
Nope, good question, I meant to ask.
So, motion to go into executive session for personnel matter?
Yep. Any more discussion? Second? I got a second. I got a second. All in favor? Aye. Aye. We are now in executive session. Thank you, everybody, for stuck it out.